Welcome back to Boring Stories, your quiet place on the internet. Here, we let boring history gently rock you to sleep, one slow chapter at a time. If you enjoy these calm, immersive journeys through the forgotten corners of the past, through dim kitchens, dusty stairwells, and lives that once were, go ahead and subscribe, tap the bell, and leave a sleepy little comment below. Maybe right. I lived in a Khrushchyovka once in a dream. Or just drop a or bed emoji. Now, close your eyes and drift back in time to a cold morning in the Soviet Union, in a building made of concrete and quiet compromise, where you are about to wake up in your Khrushchyovka. You don't wake up all at once. You rise like mist from a kettle, slow, uncertain, reluctantly shaped by warmth. Somewhere above your head, pipes creak and moan in the ceiling, iron arteries of the Khrushchyovka building groaning back to life. The radiator in your bedroom, if it can be called that, hisses like an irritated cat, sending uneven waves of warmth into the stale, cabbage-tinted air of your apartment. There is no alarm clock. You don't own one. You've trained yourself to wake with the sounds, the pipes, the distant clack of shoes in the stairwell, and the hollow metallic slam of a neighbor's door down the corridor. You lie there for a moment longer, your body cocooned under a blanket that weighs like guilt, thick, woolen, heavy, the kind of blanket that has known too many winters and too few washes. It smells faintly of lye soap and steam, and something older, like the inside of an armoire, or the past itself. The pillow beneath your head is hard and misshapen, the stuffing bunched up in odd corners. You shift your head slightly and feel a crunch from a feather that never settled right. Light begins to bleed through the single window. It's not sunlight, not really, just the dull, indistinct gray of another overcast morning in your micro-district. The window is fogged, coated in the film of condensation that forms each night when the warm breath of sleep meets the chill breath of the Soviet morning. Someone has etched something small with a fingertip, a word or a shape, now half melted and unreadable. You sit up. The floor greets your bare feet with its usual shock, cold linoleum with a parquet pattern printed on top, curling slightly at the edges where the glue never held. In one corner of the room stands your wardrobe, its veneer chipped at the corners, its mirrored door cracked in a line that runs diagonally from your face to your feet. On top of it, neatly folded, is your good shirt, reserved for occasions that rarely arrive. Your everyday clothes, stiff wool trousers, a hand-darned sweater, socks with mismatched elasticity, are draped over the chair that serves as your valet, your nightstand, and your desk. The room is barely big enough for one person to stand in and turn around. There's a shelf above the bed, sagging slightly in the middle, lined with yellowing paperbacks, Lenin's collected speeches, a dusty photo frame with a portrait of your father in uniform, and a chipped ceramic figure of a bear holding a balalaika. On the opposite wall, the wallpaper peels a little near the ceiling, revealing the gray cement beneath. Someone painted the ceiling sky blue once, but the illusion never held. You step out into the narrow hallway. The Khrushchyovka is a building of concessions, everything barely enough, nothing more than required. Your hallway is lit by a naked bulb on a fraying wire, hanging like a thought someone meant to finish. The air smells faintly of boiled potatoes, plaster dust, and the sour tang of iron from the old plumbing. You pass the coat rack, a single bent metal pole, where your coat, scarf, and a fur hat rest patiently. The mirror above the shoe tray is streaked and cracked, warping your face slightly as you glance at it. No time to fix your hair. No one will care. The kitchen is your next stop. It's a shared space, though this early it is quiet. The other family on your floor still behind closed doors, their world separated from yours by a few centimeters of crumbling plaster. The linoleum here is different, older, more worn, patterned with fake tiles that long ago lost their luster. The table is covered in oilcloth with a cherry pattern, curled at the corners, sticky in places where tea once spilled and never quite dried right. Your kettle sits on the gas burner. It is steel, dented, and blackened at the bottom. You fill it with cold water from the tap, letting it run first, because the pipes always send rust in the morning. The faucet squeals as it turns, its gasket long since stiffened. As the water heats, you prepare your cup, a thick glass in a metal holder, etched with wheat patterns. Inside it, a spoonful of zavarka, strong black tea concentrate brewed days ago and stored in a tiny enamel pot. Sugar is rationed, but you allow yourself a cube. The spoon clinks gently as you stir, the sound impossibly loud in the still apartment. Steam begins to rise. You wrap your hands around the glass and lean your hip against the counter, staring out the window over the courtyard. The view is bleak but familiar, rows of identical blocks stretching like dominoes into a colorless horizon. Somewhere, a child's voice echoes. A dog barks once, then is silenced. A woman walks with a bag of bottles clinking together like a tired wind chime. The radio murmurs from the next room, followed by soft marching music, a weather forecast, and a brief reminder that Soviet citizens are the builders of the future. You sip your tea slowly, not because it tastes good, but because it's hot, and because hot things matter more in the morning than tasty ones. The day hasn't started yet, not really, but already it presses in. You think about the day ahead, the office, the queue at the store, the elevator that doesn't work, and the way your boots will pinch if it snows. But for now you are here. In this tiny kitchen. In this Khrushchyovka. In this version of a world that insists on sameness. And in this moment, gray and quiet and full of stillness. You are simply awake and breathing. You stand in front of the cracked bathroom mirror, its edges clouded and blurred from decades of steam and tiny scratches. The faint mustiness in the air clings stubbornly, a reminder of the building's age and countless mornings just like this one. The bathroom is no larger than a small closet, cramped and dimly lit by a single bare bulb that flickers occasionally. The walls are covered in faded yellow tiles, some chipped, some missing entirely, revealing the rough gray concrete beneath, like scars on the building's skin. The sink is chipped and stained with years of hard use. Resting beside it is a pale green bar of Soviet soap, cracked and uneven from many washings. You catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror, tired eyes framed by unkempt hair, pale skin still heavy with sleep. The room smells faintly of dampness mixed with the metallic tang of old pipes and the lingering scent of mothballs. Your hands reach for a small metal cup, heavy, dented, with a dull shine worn down by years of handling. You fill it carefully with cold water from the faucet, watching as the water glistens briefly before settling. The water smells faintly of iron and old plumbing, but it's clean enough. You splash the cold water over your face, the sudden chill snapping you out of your drowsiness, sharpening your senses just enough to prepare for the day ahead. There is no hot water yet. The communal boiler heats water only on a strict schedule, and if you miss that window, you will have to boil water yourself on the ancient gas stove. You dry your face with a threadbare towel hanging from a rusted hook, the fabric rough and thin, smelling faintly of stale linen and the faint chemical bite of mothballs. Looking back into the mirror, you see the small details etched by years of this modest life, the fine lines around your eyes, the faded bruise on your wrist from yesterday's hurried work, the faint smudges of dirt that refuse to wash away. Your reflection is a quiet witness to the endurance required to live day after day in this Khrushchyovka apartment. Your kitchen is next, another cramped space with peeling wallpaper and a linoleum floor cracked in places. The faint odor of yesterday's cabbage stew still lingers, clinging stubbornly to the air. You reach for the metal kettle, battered but reliable, placing it carefully on the gas burner. The stove sputters to life with a low hiss, filling the room with the familiar scent of gas mixed with the faint hint of burnt enamel. Coffee is a rarity here, a luxury for the fortunate or well-connected. Most mornings, like today, your beverage of choice is tea, strong, bitter black tea that often gets diluted with hot water to stretch the limited supply. You carefully lift the glass cup, enclosed in its metal holder, and pour the dark tea with practiced ease. You add a cube of sugar, watching it dissolve slowly as you stir, the wooden spoon clinking gently against the glass. The radio hums quietly in the background, broadcasting the day's news, weather, and the familiar slogans of the party, all spoken in the steady monotone voice that fills the room with a strange sense of company and routine. Outside, the street is still waking, the faint sounds of footsteps echoing through the narrow courtyards between identical buildings. You take a slow sip of your tea, feeling the bitter warmth spread through your hands and down your throat. The taste is simple, unpretentious, a quiet reminder of the resilience in your daily life. No fancy aromas, no steamy froth, just the steady rhythm of mornings in the Soviet Union, in a tiny apartment, where every small comfort is earned and cherished. As you look out the single-pane window, the cold gray light of dawn creeps in, hinting at another long day ahead. The streets will soon fill with the steady flow of workers and students, trams packed beyond capacity, and the endless hum of Soviet life carrying on with quiet determination. For now, you linger for a moment longer in the soft glow of the kitchen light, savoring the modest warmth in your hands, the simple ritual that signals the start of your day, a fragile, fleeting moment of calm before the relentless pace of life pulls you forward again. You step out of your cramped Khrushchyovka apartment and into the narrow, dimly lit corridor that smells faintly of damp plaster and old cigarette smoke. The wallpaper is peeling in places, yellowed and brittle, and the overhead fluorescent lights flicker unevenly, casting unsettling shadows along the cracked linoleum floor. The constant hum of the aging building surrounds you, the distant drip of water, the creak of settling walls, and muffled voices from other apartments. At the far end of the hallway, the heavy wooden door to the communal kitchen waits, scuffed, stained, and barely hanging on rusty hinges. You push it open with a familiar creak, stepping inside to a different world entirely. The kitchen is large but cramped, a shared space that feels like the heart of this aging Soviet building, throbbing with quiet life and resilience. The air is thick and warm, filled with the mingling scents of simmering cabbage soup, strong black tea, and the faint sharp tang of pickled cucumbers stored in jars on wooden shelves. Steam rises in lazy spirals from a huge, battered samovar, its brass surface dulled and pocked by years of constant use. The rhythmic hiss and occasional whistle from the samovar mix with the steady clatter of pots and pans, creating a comforting, if somewhat chaotic, soundtrack. Several women stand clustered around the metal stove, their scarves tied tightly around their heads, faces flushed from the heat. Their voices rise and fall in quiet conversations, sometimes punctuated by laughter or a sudden sharp word when a pot boils over or someone reaches for the last piece of bread. These women, neighbors and friends, have spent countless hours here, weaving the fabric of everyday life out of scarce ingredients and shared stories. You find your usual spot by the chipped porcelain sink, its surface marred by cracks and stains that tell their own stories. The single cold water faucet drips steadily, each drop echoing softly in the tiled room. You dip your hands into the basin, feeling the chill bite through the skin despite the warm air around you. The communal sponge you use is rough and worn, shared by everyone in the building, carrying the faint grit of previous meals and the lingering smell of strong detergent. As you scrub the remnants of last night's dinner from your chipped plates, the rhythm of your movements becomes a quiet meditation. The scrape of the sponge, the swish of water, the clink of dishes drying on the frayed towel nearby. The kitchen's cracked windows leaden pale, gray light from the courtyard, revealing peeling paint on the sills and the twisted metal bars that guard the windows from the outside world. On the rough wooden shelves, jars of homemade preserves sit patiently, plums soaked in syrup, jars of pickles, and sweetened fruit compotes made last summer when the harvest was good. These jars are treasures here, symbols of care and survival in a world where store shelves are often bare or stocked with strange, unfamiliar substitutes. The bread box nearby holds a dense, dark rye loaf, its crust cracked and thick, baked in a communal bakery down the street. You glance around and notice the worn table where neighbors leave extra food, a few potatoes, a small bundle of fresh herbs, sometimes a slab of homemade cheese. These small acts of sharing are lifelines, quiet gestures of kindness and solidarity in the face of shortages and hardships. Though the kitchen feels cramped and utilitarian, it pulses with life and community. Here, people come together not only to cook and eat but to exchange news, gossip about party officials, and share quiet complaints about ration lines and the ever-elusive consumer goods. The peeling wallpaper and faded linoleum floors speak of decades past and countless meals prepared in this communal space. The chipped enamel pots and bent metal spoons have fed generations, carrying with them the memories of birthdays celebrated in whispered tones, children's laughter echoing down the halls, and the unspoken hopes of those who dreamed quietly behind closed doors. You finish washing your dishes, the cold water numbing your fingers despite your efforts to move quickly. You dry each plate carefully on the rough towel, then stack them neatly before turning toward the door. As you open it, the kitchen's warmth and smells linger for a moment longer, a small comfort before you step back into the cold, gray corridor of your building and face the routine of another Soviet day. The faint gray light of a typical Soviet morning seeps through the thin, threadbare curtain hanging on your Khrushchyovka window. The chill in the room sinks into your bones, no matter how tightly the old radiator sputters and hisses in its futile battle against the cold. You sit on the edge of your creaky metal-framed bed, your fingers fumbling in the dim light to find the worn clothes stacked neatly in your modest wooden wardrobe, a box-like relic that has long lost its paint and now shows the grain of the rough pine beneath. The wardrobe is a capsule of your life's limited possessions, a few shirts, some trousers, a couple of sweaters, and the ubiquitous heavy wool jacket that seems to serve as your armor against the harsh realities outside. Each item carries stories you rarely tell aloud, patched knees, faded collars, and the faint scent of mothballs mixed with stale smoke and detergent. You pull out your undershirt first, a coarse, scratchy cotton fabric, faded to a dull gray from many washings and sweat-soaked shifts in factories, offices, or shops. The threadbare fabric scratches your skin, but warmth is the priority. You slip it over your head and tug it down, feeling the chill begin to retreat from your torso. Next comes your button-up shirt, the color somewhere between navy blue and industrial gray. The collar is stiff, starched as best as it can be with the limited supplies from the communal laundry, and creases betray the many times it has been ironed under the watchful eye of your mother or wife. You button it carefully, mindful of the faded, sometimes missing buttons you have sewn back on with thick thread salvaged from old clothes. Your trousers are the next hurdle, thick, heavy woolen fabric meant to protect you from the biting cold, but clumsy and rigid from years of wear. You pull them up, the waistband snug from many alterations. A patch on the right knee, hand-stitched in coarse black thread, stands out. A small emblem of survival after a slip on an icy street last winter. You sit briefly to pull on thick socks, another scarce resource, knitted hastily by a neighbor or a family member with worn-out needles. Your shoes, sturdy Soviet boots made of rough leather, sit by the bed. Their soles are worn thin, but you polish them meticulously with a bit of black wax saved from the communal supply closet, because appearances matter, especially when you step out into the communal world. Each scratch and crease on the leather tells a tale of cold mornings, long walks to the factory, and crowded buses packed with fellow workers heading to the same gray routine. The wool jacket comes last, heavy and almost suffocating in the confined space of your room. Its lining is frayed, and the faded insignia sewn onto the shoulder is a constant reminder of your identity within the vast Soviet machine. The jacket's weight seems to anchor you, a comfort and a burden all at once. You button it up carefully, securing the collar against the cold draft sneaking through the building's cracks. On a small hook by the door hangs your woolen Ushanka hat, the classic Soviet winter hat with ear flaps that can be tied above the head or fastened under the chin. You pull it on, feeling the soft fur lining warm your ears instantly. Gloves, thick and padded but worn thin on the fingertips, follow. They're your shield against the icy wind that greets you outside. Before stepping into the corridor, you take a moment in front of the cracked, foggy mirror leaning against the wall. Your reflection is tired but resolute. The faint scars and lines on your face speak of years of hard work and quiet endurance. You straighten the collar of your shirt one last time, smooth your jacket, and prepare yourself mentally for the day ahead. The cold concrete hallway greets you with its familiar chill. The radiator nearby hisses in a half-hearted attempt to warm the space, and the stale smell of the building, a mixture of dampness, dust, and faint mold, fills your nostrils. You pull your jacket tighter and step outside, locking your apartment door behind you with a heavy, reassuring click. This morning ritual of dressing is more than just preparing your body. It is a preparation of spirit. In every stitch, patch, and worn fabric there is a story of resilience, a story shared by millions of Soviet citizens facing each day with the same quiet determination to survive and contribute to the collective. As you walk down the concrete stairs toward the busy street, the first sounds of the city reach you, the distant rumble of buses, the chatter of early risers, the clatter of boots on pavement. Your clothing, humble but functional, shields you not only from the harsh winter cold but also from the uncertainties of a life tightly controlled by the state, a life measured in small victories and the hope that tomorrow might bring something better. As you step out of your apartment building, the cold immediately hits you like a slap, biting and unrelenting, seeping through your thick wool coat and chilling you to the bone. The wind rushes down the concrete canyon formed by rows of Khrushchyovkas, those characteristic Soviet apartment blocks built to house hundreds of families in a uniform, utilitarian style. Their facades are a patchwork of peeling paint, faded plaster, and occasional hand-painted slogans about the greatness of the party or the heroism of workers, remnants of a time when ideology was painted across every surface. The micro-district spreads out before you, an endless grid of identical buildings stretching in every direction, disappearing into the low-hanging gray sky. The sun is just a pale disk behind thick clouds, casting no warmth, only a diffused, cold light that makes everything seem washed out and lifeless. Snow crunches beneath your boots, hardened into icy patches from days of freezing temperatures and the steady trampling of thousands of feet. Each step feels heavy, a reminder of the weight this place carries. The weight of countless lives lived in close quarters, of dreams deferred, of survival in a system that demands endurance above all else. You notice the details that define this frozen landscape. The metal balconies cluttered with drying laundry or battered furniture, the frost-covered windows where condensation forms little rivers that trace the silhouettes of lives inside. Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of a factory startup engine mingles with the clatter of trolleybuses and the distant shouts of children playing in a snow-dusted courtyard, their voices muffled by the thick, heavy air. The streets here are wide but feel claustrophobic, hemmed in by walls of concrete and steel. The sidewalks are cracked and uneven, where patches of ice gleam treacherously in the muted light. Benches line the sidewalks, but they are mostly empty now, buried under heaps of snow or covered with frost. The playgrounds, simple metal structures of swings, slides, and climbing frames, stand abandoned and silent, their bright colors dulled by rust and winter's grasp. As you walk, you pass a communal garden patch, a small square of earth surrounded by a low fence, now frozen solid. Last summer, the neighbors would have planted tomatoes, cucumbers, and herbs here, sharing the harvest as a small act of rebellion against the uniform grayness of the concrete jungle. Now, all that remains are brittle stalks poking through the snow, fragile reminders of warmer days and harder-earned pleasures. The scent of the micro-district is a blend of damp concrete, faint smoke from nearby boilers, and the sharp tang of frozen air. Occasionally, the aroma of freshly baked black bread drifts from the corner bakery, cutting through the chill with a warm promise. You spot a small grocery store with its windows fogged up, behind which residents line up patiently for basic staples: bread, potatoes, canned goods, the familiar scarcity dictating every household's weekly rhythm. People pass by wrapped tightly in heavy coats, scarves wrapped around their faces, eyes cast downward against the biting wind. There is a quietness to their movements, a stoicism born of years of adapting to the harsh climate and the rigid demands of Soviet life. Conversations are brief and practical, an exchange about the bus schedule, a question about the availability of goods at the store. But rarely do you hear laughter or see smiles in this cold, gray world. Children, bundled up in oversized coats and knitted hats, dart between buildings, their breath steaming in the frosty air. Their voices echo faintly across the courtyards, a rare splash of life amid the monochrome. Some cling to their sleds or ice skates, dreaming of fleeting joys in a landscape dominated by sameness and survival. You reach the bus stop, a simple concrete shelter with chipped paint and frosted glass panels. A small crowd waits silently, stamping their feet against the cold pavement, their breath misting in the air. The buses here come on a schedule governed by state planners, often late or overcrowded, packed with workers heading to factories, students to schools, and mothers to markets. Looking back at the rows of buildings behind you, their countless windows reflect a patchwork of lives. Families gathered around radios, grandparents knitting in dim kitchens, teenagers reading dog-eared books by the faint light of an electric bulb. Each apartment a small world contained within the vast, indifferent architecture. The micro-district is both prison and refuge, a place of anonymity amid the crowd, yet also a community forged by shared hardships and quiet solidarity. It is the beating heart of Soviet urban life, where dreams are modest and survival is a daily act of courage. As you trudge onward, the snow crunching beneath your boots, you carry with you the weight of these frozen streets, the stories etched into every cracked sidewalk, every frost-covered balcony, every frozen tree limb. This is your world, gray and cold, yet alive with the pulse of millions, moving steadily forward through the long Soviet winter. You step outside your Khrushchyovka apartment block into the cold, gray morning. The bitter air bites at any inch of exposed skin, swirling around your face like 1,000 tiny needles. Snow crunches beneath your boots, half melted and frozen again into a slippery crust. The sky is a heavy, oppressive blanket of dull gray, swallowing the faint light of dawn and making the world feel smaller, colder, and more claustrophobic. The distant hum of trolleybuses and cars struggling through icy streets fills the silence. Your breath billows in front of you in clouds, and you tuck your chin into the scarf wrapped tight around your neck, ready to face the daily ritual that has become one of the most defining and soul-crushing parts of life in the Soviet Union, standing in line for bread. The bakery you're heading to isn't much, a small, concrete building squeezed between two identical gray apartment blocks, with frosted windows and a faded sign above the door. It might not look like much, but it's a lifeline. A loaf of bread here is more than just food. It is a token of survival, a key to daily existence, a fragile promise that the state's complicated and often failing distribution system will deliver enough to feed its people today. Already, a line has formed, a slow-moving, winding serpent of people, stretching from the bakery door and curling around the corner. You join at the back, clutching your worn-out canvas bag, fingers numb despite your gloves. Around you, the air is filled with the low murmur of voices, tired, resigned, occasionally punctuated by whispered complaints or the distant, restless cry of a child. You recognize some faces in the crowd, neighbors from your building, people you've come to know simply through the shared experience of waiting in line. There's the elderly woman who lives 3 floors above you, wrapped in a threadbare shawl despite the thick winter coat she wears. The young factory worker with grease-stained hands and a fresh cut on his cheek. A mother trying to keep her 2 children close, juggling a plastic bag and a baby bundled in layers of clothes. Each person carries their own story, their own quiet struggle with this daily grind. Some stare blankly ahead, lost in thought or just numbed by the repetition. Others exchange brief words about recent news, whispers of news shortages, changes in rationing, or rumors of trucks stuck somewhere on icy roads, delaying the arrival of supplies. The line inches forward slowly, each step a small victory. The cold seeps deeper into your bones, but you keep moving, knowing that missing this chance could mean waiting another entire day with an empty stomach. The bitter wind bites at your cheeks and nose, turning skin raw and red. You pull your scarf higher, tug at your worn cap, and try to focus on the warmth you know waits inside. Behind the bakery's frosted glass windows, the bakers work in steamy, overheated rooms. You can hear the clang of metal trays, the rhythmic thud of dough being kneaded, and the occasional sharp command in a gruff voice. The scent of freshly baked bread, warm, yeasty, slightly sour from the rye, drifts faintly through the window, a cruel reminder of what you are all waiting for. You remember the stories your parents told you about the war years, when bread was even scarcer, and lines stretched for hours, even days. Now, decades later, the shortages are still a fact of life, though wrapped in the ideological language of a system that promises plenty but often delivers little. The line outside the bakery is one of the most visible symbols of that contradiction, the state's grand proclamations of equality and abundance reduced to waiting, standing, hoping. As the minutes drag on, you feel the weight of collective exhaustion settling over the crowd. Fingers twitch in gloves, breath comes in shallow puffs, and bodies sway slightly, trying to stay warm. A few people shuffle their feet, stamping to revive circulation. Some older men lean on canes, their faces etched with years of hardship, their eyes steady but tired. You overhear a hushed conversation about the quality of the bread, how some days the crust is too thick and hard, or the loaf is smaller than usual. But today, people aren't complaining, they're just grateful for any bread at all. You notice a few younger women sharing small pieces of candy or fruit, trading scraps from their limited food supply, gestures of camaraderie in this daily test of endurance. At last, the person in front of you is called inside. You clutch your bag tighter, the cold finally forgotten for a moment in the surge of hope and anticipation. The clerk behind the counter looks tired but efficient, passing loaves wrapped in thin paper to waiting customers. When your turn comes, you step forward, fumbling to open your bag, and the clerk hands you a loaf of dark rye bread, still warm, with a thick crust and a slightly uneven shape. You feel the warmth of the bread seep through the paper and into your fingers, a small comfort in the endless cold. The aroma is strong and familiar, a constant companion in your life here. You fold the bag closed and step away from the counter, your heart lifting slightly despite the fatigue. As you walk back through the micro-district, the loaf heavy in your hand, the buildings rise like silent, monolithic witnesses to the lives unfolding below. Snowflakes begin to fall again, drifting slowly onto the cracked pavement. Children's laughter echoes faintly from a distant playground, a fleeting moment of joy amidst the harshness. You know tomorrow you will do this all again. You know that lines, shortages, and struggle are part of this life, part of the system that shapes every moment. But for now, you have your bread. You have a small victory. And as you open the door to your apartment, the warm smell of your loaf fills the small kitchen, promising nourishment and a brief reprieve from the cold outside. You push open the heavy metal doors of the gray Soviet office building, a hulking structure of concrete and glass that rises starkly against the dull skyline. The cold winter air rushes in for a moment before you step inside and the heavy doors clang shut behind you. The lobby is vast and echoing, its marble walls gleaming faintly under flickering fluorescent lights. But the atmosphere is sterile and lifeless, filled only with the murmurs of other workers waiting for their shift to begin. A massive clock ticks loudly on the wall, its hands moving inexorably forward, counting down the minutes to the start of another day trapped inside the machinery of Soviet bureaucracy. You hang your coat and scarf on a metal rack near the entrance, the thin metal prongs scraping against the worn fabric. The coat is heavy but threadbare, a relic from years past, patched carefully in places, just like many things in your life. Around you, the hum of tired voices blends with the distant clatter of heels and boots on linoleum floors. The stale smell of cigarette smoke lingers, mixing with the faint scent of damp wool and dust. You step forward, joining a slow-moving stream of people filing into the vast maze of corridors, each one lined with identical gray doors. Behind those doors, hundreds of office workers like you sit at cluttered desks piled high with paperwork, typing reports, copying statistics, and completing forms that will eventually be shuffled up a labyrinthine chain of command, only to disappear into endless filing cabinets. Your own workstation is small and cramped. The desk, made of scratched wood and metal, holds a bulky mechanical typewriter, several stacks of yellowing papers, a rotary phone that rings sporadically with complaints or orders, and a faded photograph of your family pinned awkwardly to the partition. The chair squeaks every time you shift your weight, its cushioning worn thin from years of use. The small window beside your desk looks out onto a bleak courtyard littered with melting snow and garbage, a gray monotony that mirrors the feeling inside. The job was never your choice. After graduating from university, you were assigned here, like thousands of others, without regard for your hopes or skills. Your days are spent performing endless, repetitive tasks dictated by the demands of the state, your personal ambitions swallowed up by the great, grinding system. The paperwork never ends. You compile production reports, verify compliance forms, calculate quotas, and draft official correspondence. Every task feels pointless, like pushing a boulder uphill only to watch it roll back down again. The office is a microcosm of Soviet society, hierarchical, rigid, and surveilled. Your supervisors patrol the floor with hawk-like vigilance, their faces stern and unreadable, eyes flicking over each desk for signs of laziness or dissent. The party's presence is palpable. Posters on the walls glorify workers, collective achievements, and Soviet heroes. The hammer and sickle emblazoned everywhere serve as constant reminders of the ideological framework that governs everything you do. But behind the slogans and propaganda, the reality is far grimmer. You glance at the clock on the wall. It's barely mid-morning, and the day stretches out endlessly before you. Your fingers hover over the typewriter keys, the metal mechanism stiff and resistant. The sound of the clacking keys fills the quiet office, the rhythm both maddening and hypnotic. Your mind drifts to thoughts of freedom, of work that brings meaning, of a life unbound by routine and surveillance. But those thoughts feel dangerous here. Conformity is safety, rebellion is punishment. Across the room, a colleague whispers about the latest shortages at the store: bread, sugar, toilet paper. A few desks away, another worker complains about the endless delays in receiving proper office supplies, forced instead to improvise with scraps and damaged equipment. Everyone shares the same weary resignation, but also small moments of camaraderie, an exchanged joke, a shared cigarette, a furtive glance at forbidden literature smuggled into the office. These are lifelines amid the drudgery. Your supervisor, a grizzled man with a permanent scowl, suddenly approaches your desk. His gaze lingers on the stack of reports you've prepared, then flicks to your expression. There's no warmth or encouragement, only the cold, bureaucratic expectation that you will deliver more, faster, better. You nod silently, knowing that any hint of frustration or complaint might mark you for scrutiny. Lunch break arrives like a brief reprieve. You join your coworkers in the canteen, a large room filled with long wooden tables and metal chairs. The menu is sparse: boiled potatoes, a thin slice of sausage, watery cabbage soup, and black bread, the staples of Soviet fare. Conversation is muted, weighed down by the knowledge that tomorrow will be the same as today and yesterday. Still, there is a strange comfort in the shared struggle, the quiet bond formed by enduring this life together. Back at your desk, the afternoon blurs into evening. The fluorescent lights hum overhead, casting a pale glow over the tired faces around you. You finish your last report and prepare to hand it over to the clerk who will send it up the chain. The moment feels simultaneously insignificant and monumental. This small paper, this routine task, a link in a vast system that controls everything. As you pack your belongings to leave, the weight of the day settles in your shoulders. You step back into the cold air outside, the city wrapped in twilight and silence. The life you lead, the office job you never chose, is a quiet battle of endurance and conformity. It shapes who you are, defines your place in this vast, complex world. You walk home through the snowy streets, the buildings looming around you like giant gray sentinels. The light fades, the cold deepens, but inside you carries the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow will bring something different. You push open the heavy door of the Stalovaya, a plain, unadorned building nestled among identical blocks of concrete housing in your micro-district. The winter chill still lingers in the air as you step inside, but the warmth of the crowded cafeteria envelopes you almost immediately. The faint hum of conversation, the clatter of metal trays, and the rhythmic scraping of spoons against plates create a constant background noise that feels both chaotic and strangely comforting. The interior is functional and stark. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead, casting a harsh glare on the pale linoleum floors and peeling beige walls. Posters celebrating the achievements of Soviet workers and slogans like "Glory to Great Labor" hang in faded frames. A large clock ticks steadily on one wall, its hands marking the relentless passage of time in this place where every minute counts. You clutch your lunch ticket tightly, a small, thin paper slip that feels like a precious commodity. It grants you access to today's meal, but you already know the options will be limited and repetitive. The line snakes slowly through the room, stretching past rows of wooden tables filled with workers from all walks of Soviet life. Men in factory uniforms chat quietly with office clerks. Mothers balancing small children sit next to stoic pensioners. Students clutching books stand alongside grizzled veterans. Everyone is here for the same purpose: nourishment to fuel another day within the vast machinery of the state. As you inch forward, the smells grow stronger. The sour tang of borscht mingles with the heavy aroma of boiled cabbage and the faint scent of greasy fried potatoes. There is a faint metallic note in the air from the giant steel pots simmering on the kitchen stoves. The cafeteria workers, clad in white aprons and caps, move swiftly behind the counters, ladling portions with practiced efficiency. Their faces are blank, tired from years of repetition, but their hands never falter. Today's menu is typical: a bowl of watery borscht dotted with limp chunks of beet and cabbage, a modest portion of boiled potatoes with a thin slice of sausage, a thick slab of black bread, and a small helping of sweetened tvorog for dessert. There's no choice, no options. What is cooked is what you receive. The planned economy dictates the flow of food as rigidly as it dictates your life. You collect your tray and seek out a place to sit. The tables are crowded, but there is a palpable sense of community here, even if spoken words are few. You find a spot next to a young woman in a floral headscarf, who smiles faintly before turning back to her food. Around you, conversations rise and fall like the low murmur of a river. Discussions about the latest shortages, whispered gossip about promotions and transfers, quiet complaints about the never-ending queues for everything from toothpaste to clothing. You raise your spoon to your lips, tasting the borscht. The flavor is muted, the vegetables overcooked, the broth thin and bland, yet somehow, this simple meal sustains you. Each bite is a reminder of the compromises forced upon every Soviet citizen. Luxury is a concept for others, for distant places and times beyond your reach. Here, in this room filled with ordinary people, survival is the priority. Glancing around, you notice the subtle ways people make their time here more bearable. A quick exchange of a piece of bread between two coworkers, a shared cigarette behind the kitchen, a knowing glance when the food supply dips low again. These small acts of solidarity create bonds in a world that often feels cold and impersonal. Lunch at the Stolovaya is more than just a meal. It is a ritual, a pause in the relentless rhythm of Soviet life. It is a place where the state's grand ideals collide with the realities of everyday existence. You eat not just to fill your stomach, but to participate in a shared experience that binds millions of lives across the vast expanse of the Union. As you finish your meal, the din of the cafeteria swells with the arrival of the next shift of workers. You rise, carrying your tray to the designated clearing area, where you stack it with others. The clatter of dishes echoes as you step back into the cold afternoon air, the gray world outside waiting for you to return. Your stomach may be full, but the hunger for freedom, for something beyond this life of routine and austerity, lingers on, a quiet ember beneath the surface, waiting for a day when it might finally catch fire. The usual buzz of office chatter abruptly dies down as the news spreads. The party representative is coming for a surprise inspection. The announcement feels like a cold gust blowing through the stale air of the room. You sit frozen for a moment, heart tightening. This isn't just any visitor. This is the embodiment of the Soviet system's ever-watchful eye, the enforcer of discipline, the arbiter of your fate within the bureaucratic maze. The gray walls of your workplace, usually a dull backdrop, now seem to close in, oppressive and suffocating. The buzzing fluorescent lights feel harsher, their artificial glare exposing every imperfection, a crooked stack of papers, a smudge on the glass, a forgotten file. You exchange worried glances with your coworkers. Everyone knows the stakes. A careless word, a delayed report, or a hint of dissatisfaction could ruin your career or worse. The party representative arrives without warning. A stern man in a dark, stiff suit, his expression unreadable but unmistakably cold, his sharp eyes slicing through the room like knives. He carries no badge or official announcement. His mere presence commands immediate obedience. As he walks between desks, the room becomes a theater of silent anxiety. Conversations cease mid-sentence. Fingers hover over keyboards, and the constant tapping of pens slows to an uneasy stillness. You watch as he stops at a colleague's desk, scrutinizing a stack of reports with piercing intensity. He asks pointed questions about quotas, deadlines, compliance with 5-year plans, attendance, and political education sessions. Answers must be perfect, rehearsed, loyal. You feel the weight of decades of propaganda pressing down on you. The party is our guiding star. Work diligently for the prosperity of the Soviet people. We must exceed the plan. When he reaches your desk, you straighten nervously. His gaze fixes on you like a spotlight. He picks up your reports, flipping through them methodically. You catch a bead of sweat forming on your forehead despite the chill in the room. You answer his questions as precisely as you can, quoting statistics and plans you barely understand, using the approved slogans as shields. Behind his eyes, you sense the relentless pressure of the system, the fear of failure, the paranoia of betrayal. The party representative is not just inspecting work, he is testing your loyalty, your conformity, your place in the vast machinery of control. You know of colleagues who have been reprimanded, demoted, or even arrested following such visits, their lives upended by a single careless mistake or whispered complaint. The minutes drag on, each one stretched thin by tension. The silence is punctuated only by the sharp tones of the representative's voice, cold and demanding, and the occasional rustle of papers. You hear muffled whispers at other desks, some fearful, some cynical. Some workers exchange subtle glances that speak volumes: fear, resignation, defiance. Outside the window, the world seems indifferent. The concrete towers stand stoic against the gray sky. The winter wind rattles the bare branches of trees, and distant factory chimneys puff out clouds of smoke into the bleak horizon. But inside, the party's presence is absolute. You feel the invisible chains tightening, reminding you that every move, every word, every thought is subject to scrutiny. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the party representative steps back. He delivers a brief speech, praising efficiency here, warning of slackness there, emphasizing the importance of ideological purity and hard work. His words are both a threat and a promise, a reminder that the system protects the faithful but punishes the wavering without mercy. As he leaves, the office exhales collectively. Some return to their tasks with a forced calm, others slump in their chairs, drained by the ordeal. You sit quietly, the adrenaline fading but the unease lingering. The visit may be over, but the party's eyes remain everywhere, watching, judging, controlling. You realize that in this world, loyalty is not a choice but a survival strategy. Your life, like millions of others, is shaped by invisible forces that govern every detail, from what you say at meetings to how you fill out your paperwork, to the very way you think. And so you prepare yourself for the days ahead, knowing that the next surprise inspection could come at any moment. A constant reminder that under the weight of the Soviet system, freedom is always just out of reach. The long day of work finally fades into a chilly evening as you return to your cramped Khrushchyovka apartment. The cold seeps through the thin walls, a reminder of the harsh Soviet winter outside. The dim hallway smells faintly of damp concrete, worn-out linoleum, and the lingering scent of boiled potatoes mixed with the faint traces of cigarette smoke wafting through the poorly sealed window cracks. The elevator is broken again, a familiar nuisance, so you trudge up the narrow stairwell to the 5th floor, boots scraping against the cracked tiles. Inside your small, gray-walled apartment, the pale glow of the single light bulb hanging from the ceiling casts long shadows over the peeling wallpaper and the sparse furniture. The centerpiece of your living room is the bulky, boxy black and white television, perched precariously atop an aging wooden cabinet scarred by years of use. Its thick glass screen reflects the dim light, promising a brief escape from the monotony of Soviet life. You carefully turn the big, clunky dial to the only channel available, the state-run central television. The screen flickers to life with static and grainy images that pulse with the characteristic low hum of the cathode ray tube. The sound crackles and pops, sometimes cutting out altogether, forcing you to twist the small knob to adjust the volume and picture clarity. Despite the imperfections, the television is a precious luxury, a rare window into the wider Soviet world, where millions across the vast country are watching the exact same programs. The evening news begins, its solemn narrator delivering the party's messages with unwavering conviction. You listen as he recounts the latest achievements of the 5-year plan, factories meeting quotas, new apartment blocks rising in Moscow, collective farms producing record harvests. The faces on the screen are smiling, determined workers and proud cosmonauts orbiting the Earth, symbols of Soviet progress and strength. Every word is carefully crafted propaganda, designed to bolster morale and reinforce the idea that your sacrifices contribute to building a better future for the motherland. As the news fades, the programming shifts to cultural content, a ballet performance from the Bolshoi Theater, classical music recitals, or a documentary on Russian history. These segments are a source of quiet pride, a reminder of the Soviet Union's rich artistic heritage amid the otherwise gray and controlled daily life. The grainy black and white images make the dancers' movements seem ethereal, almost otherworldly, contrasting sharply with the harshness outside your window. Tonight's program includes a popular comedy sketch, one of the few moments where laughter is allowed, albeit within strict boundaries. The actors perform in simple sets, their jokes carefully vetted to avoid any hint of dissent. You and your family share a rare smile, the warmth of humor briefly lifting the weight of your worries. Children in the apartment next door might be watching a puppet show, their delighted giggles muffled through the thin walls. Between programs, the silence of your apartment feels loud. You notice the small details around you, the worn-out sofa with its sagging cushions, the faded floral curtain fluttering slightly in the draft, a shelf lined with old books and magazines, some dog-eared copies of Pravda and Izvestia. A small radio sits in the corner, turned off for now, but ready for the next broadcast of Soviet pop songs or official announcements. Outside, the city is cloaked in the quiet of a winter evening. Street lamps cast pools of yellow light on the snow-covered pavements. The occasional tram clatters past, its rhythmic clang echoing down the empty streets. Somewhere nearby, a neighbor turns up the volume of a radio playing a folk song, its melody drifting faintly through the walls. As the final program ends and the television screen goes dark, you sit for a moment in the lingering glow, reflecting on the day and the many like it. Life in the Soviet Union is a series of routines, work, cues, communal meals, the ever-present watch of the party. Yet, in these moments in front of the black and white TV, a flickering glow of shared experience connects you to millions of others across the vast expanse of the country. Turning off the television, you prepare for bed in your small, shared apartment. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, its own rituals, but for now, the quiet night holds a fragile sense of comfort. The black and white images may be grainy and limited, but they are a thread weaving together the stories of millions living under the same sky, bound by the same hopes and hardships. Saturday morning breaks slowly in your Khrushchyovka apartment. The muted gray light filters through the thin curtains, casting pale shadows over the small kitchen table, where yesterday's dishes still sit drying on the rack. Outside, the familiar sounds of the micro-district slowly stir to life, the distant rumble of a trolleybus, the occasional bark of a dog, and the soft murmur of neighbors beginning their weekend routines. In the Soviet Union, Saturdays are sacred for cleaning, a ritual passed down through generations, a necessary preparation for the coming week and a way to reclaim a sense of order in your otherwise crowded and chaotic life. Today, your small family embarks on this shared task, armed with nothing but simple, sometimes harsh, but effective cleaning agents: vinegar, boiling water, soap flakes, and rags worn thin from repeated use. First, the kettle whistles softly on the stove. Boiling water will be your most trusted ally in the fight against grime and winter dirt tracked in from the streets. You fill the enamel basin with steaming water, ready to pour it carefully over the cracked linoleum floors, a makeshift method of washing away months of accumulated dust and grit. The heat rises quickly, fogging the window panes, mixing with the sharp smell of vinegar, a scent synonymous with cleaning in Soviet homes. You mix vinegar into the water, a harsh, sour odor filling the room but promising a disinfecting power that soap alone can't provide. Vinegar is your secret weapon against mold in the damp corners of the bathroom, and the lingering smells that no amount of soap seems to fully erase. It is cheap, readily available, and effective, a perfect fit for the budget-conscious housewife or husband who must stretch every ruble. The ritual begins in the kitchen, where the stove's enamel surface has turned dull from years of scrubbing. You pour boiling water over greasy patches, letting the heat loosen stubborn stains, then follow with vigorous wiping using a coarse sponge. The worn wallpaper edges curl slightly from the steam, but you pay no mind. The goal is cleanliness, no matter the collateral damage. The floor tiles, cracked and uneven, receive your focused attention as you kneel to scrub, trying to reach every corner where crumbs and dust have gathered. Next comes the bathroom, a tiny room with chipped white tiles and an old cast iron tub stained from years of use. Here, boiling water and vinegar are indispensable. You pour steaming liquid into the basin and carefully rinse surfaces, fighting persistent mildew and the faint smell of stagnant water that always seems to linger. The bathroom window, too small and often fogged, lets in little light, making the task feel even more grimy and never-ending. Throughout the apartment, the wooden furniture, scarred from decades of use, receives attention. You wipe down the kitchen table, the peeling paint revealing the dark wood beneath. The worn chairs creak as you lean on them, but they are sturdy and familiar, holding memories of countless meals and conversations. Dust swirls in the shafts of light as you move from room to room, carrying buckets of boiling water, refilling them from the kettle, and wringing out rag after rag. Outside the window, you see other families engaged in similar rituals, balconies cluttered with mops and buckets, windows open to let out the smells of vinegar and boiled linseed oil. The micro-district itself seems to hold its collective breath, united in the effort to bring some order to the worn-out buildings and the tired lives inside. By afternoon, the apartment begins to feel different, cleaner, brighter despite the persistent gray light outside. The air smells sharp but fresh, a small victory in the ongoing struggle against dirt and decay. You sit briefly on the couch, tired but satisfied, as the kettle begins to whistle again for tea, signaling a break in the day's labor. Saturday cleaning in the Soviet Union is more than a chore. It's a ritual of survival, of pride in your home no matter how small or worn it is. With vinegar and boiling water as your weapons, you carve out a space of order and cleanliness amid the harsh realities of everyday life. Sunday mornings in the Soviet Union arrive slowly, wrapped in a quiet, expectant stillness that fills your small Khrushchyovka apartment. The pale light of a muted sun filters through the thin, often threadbare curtains, casting a soft glow over the faded wallpaper and the mismatched furniture worn by decades of use. It is a day when the usual hustle of the workweek pauses, and families prepare for the modest ritual of venturing outside, if the unforgiving Russian weather allows. Outside, the micro-district lies under a heavy gray sky, the kind that seems to weigh on the shoulders of everyone who lives there. The cold air bites at exposed skin, even in spring or autumn, a lingering reminder that winter in the Soviet Union never truly releases its grip. But if the temperature hovers just above freezing, the decision is made. The park is the destination. Dressing for the day is a careful balance of warmth and practicality. Your coat, thick but patched in several places, hugs your frame tightly. The woolen scarf, frayed at the edges but treasured for its warmth, is wound several times around your neck. Thick gloves, worn thin at the fingertips, are pulled on with practiced efficiency. You step out into the street, the crunch of frost-hardened dirt beneath your boots breaking the quiet. The walk to the park is a passage through the familiar landscape of Soviet life, endless rows of gray, concrete apartment blocks stretching in every direction, their surfaces stained by decades of industrial dust and the occasional splash of faded paint. Balconies jut out like boxy eyes, some decorated with peeling flower pots, others cluttered with drying laundry or makeshift storage. The air smells faintly of wood smoke from nearby heating stoves and the sour tang of vinegar used in last night's cleaning. The park itself is a humble patch of green space carved out in the heart of the micro-district. In better times, it was meant to be a place of leisure and community, but now it feels more like a stubborn remnant of a forgotten ideal. The pathways are cracked and uneven, often muddy from the melting snow. Leafless trees stand tall, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. A cold wind whistles softly through the branches, carrying with it the sharp scent of wet earth and damp concrete. Despite the bleak surroundings, the park is alive with quiet activity. Families have gathered, their breath rising in visible clouds as children dash between the rusted playground equipment. The swings creak eerily as small hands push themselves higher, and the metal slide gleams coldly in the pale light. The sandbox, more dirt than sand, is a favorite spot for the youngest, who dig with wooden spoons or their bare hands, their laughter ringing like a rare melody in the cold air. Parents, bundled tightly in scarves and hats, watch from nearby benches. These benches, chipped and scarred by decades of use, offer little comfort but serve as vital meeting points. Conversations ripple through the group, muted discussions about the shortages in the grocery store, the never-ending queues for basic goods, whispers about whether the new factory will hire more workers, and rumors of promotions or transfers. This social fabric, woven from shared hardship, creates a fragile sense of belonging and community. Older men occupy the park's small chess tables, hunched over their boards with intense focus. Their faces are etched with the marks of time, wrinkles deepened by years of hardship and resilience. The clicking of chess pieces against the weathered boards echoes softly, a sound as familiar as the wind itself. Occasionally, a knowing glance or a dry joke is exchanged, a rare moment of levity amid the cold and quiet. Nearby, groups of elderly women gather to feed the pigeons. They scatter torn pieces of black bread, a common staple in Soviet households, watching as the birds flutter and peck greedily. This simple act of kindness is a cherished ritual, a way to find joy in small, everyday gestures. Street musicians occasionally appear, their worn instruments adding color to the somber scene. The bright, twanging notes of a balalaika cut through the air, followed by the soulful moan of a harmonica. People pause to listen, some dropping a few kopecks into an open case, a small but meaningful exchange that helps these musicians survive. The air carries the faint smell of roasted sunflower seeds from a nearby vendor's cart. The vendor, an older man with weather-beaten hands and a weary smile, sells his snack in small paper cones, a treat that offers a brief moment of comfort and normalcy. Children eagerly clutch these cones, cracking open shells and spitting them on the ground, their faces glowing with delight. As the afternoon wears on, the sun sinks lower, casting long, cold shadows across the frozen ground. The chill deepens, and families begin to gather their belongings. Coats are tightened, scarves adjusted, and gloves pulled back on as everyone prepares for the walk home. The park quiets again, the laughter and chatter fading like a half-remembered dream. Walking back through the gray streets toward your apartment, you feel the weight of the day settle into your bones, the cold, the small joys, the steady rhythm of Soviet life. Sundays at the park are modest and fleeting, but they offer a brief respite from the relentless demands of daily survival. They are a thread of shared humanity woven through the harsh fabric of life under the Soviet sky, a reminder that even in the bleakest places, moments of warmth and connection endure. After a long week of cramped apartments, gray skies, and endless queues, Sunday afternoon brings the promise of a trip to the banya, the Soviet communal bathhouse, a place both sacred and practical, where you come not just to clean your body, but to wash away the weight of daily life. The banya is a sanctuary from the cold, the cramped spaces, and the monotonous routine. It's a ritual, a social event, and a rare taste of warmth and community. You gather your simple kit, a well-worn felt hat to protect your head from the intense heat, a thin linen towel, a wooden ladle for pouring water on the stones, and a bundle of birch or oak branches, vinegar, carefully tied together. These branches are your tools for the ritual, meant to gently beat your skin and improve circulation, a tradition passed down through generations. The walk to the banya leads you past the familiar concrete blocks, their sharp angles softened by the gathering dusk. You notice a few neighbors making the same trek, their faces flushed in anticipation of the heat to come. Inside the banya building, the sharp scent of wood smoke and wet stone hits you immediately, an earthy, smoky aroma mixed with the scent of steaming water and birch leaves. Entering the changing room, the atmosphere is thick with steam and muffled voices. Rows of wooden benches line the walls, where people undress and stow their clothes in small lockers or hang them on pegs. You join the crowd, a mix of men and women, young and old, sharing a communal experience that blurs social boundaries. The heat room, or parilka, is where the real magic happens. Inside, the air is dense with steam, hot enough to make your skin prickle and your breath come in short gasps. The walls are lined with heavy wooden benches arranged in tiers, and the floor is warm beneath your feet. A massive stove crackles at one end, its stones glowing red-hot, ready to be doused with buckets of water to send clouds of scalding steam into the air. You sit on the upper bench, feeling the heat seep deep into your muscles, loosening tension and washing away fatigue. The vinegar is handed to you, and with gentle, rhythmic strokes, you lightly beat your arms, legs, and back, the soft leaves releasing a fresh, resinous scent and stimulating your blood flow. The sensation is both invigorating and soothing, a sharp contrast to the cold you endure outside. Conversations are hushed but friendly. Strangers become companions through shared sighs of relief and laughter at the heat's intensity. You hear old jokes, stories of hard work, and simple advice on health and life. The communal nature of the banya fosters a quiet camaraderie, a momentary escape from the isolation of Soviet life. After a while, you stand and rush out to the adjacent cold room or plunge into a nearby cold water bath, the shock of icy water hitting your skin making you gasp. It's a sharp contrast to the heat, but invigorates every nerve and clears your mind. The cycle of hot steam and cold water repeats several times, each round washing away a little more of the week's grime, both physical and emotional. Finally, you return to the changing room, wrapped in your towel and feeling lighter, renewed. The banya is more than a place to clean. It's a ritual of resilience and renewal, a rare oasis of warmth and community that breaks through the gray monotony of Soviet life. As you walk back through the quiet streets toward your apartment, the lingering scent of birch and steam clings to your skin, a small, comforting reminder that even in the hardest times, simple human rituals endure. The night settles over your Khrushchyovka, the faint hum of distant city lights barely piercing the thick blanket of Soviet gray. In your cramped apartment, the faint scent of boiled cabbage from dinner lingers, mingling with the cold draft sneaking under the cracked window frame. You sit quietly on your worn-out armchair, the fabric threadbare from years of use, and stare out the window into the endless sea of concrete buildings. The sky above is a dull slate, broken only by the flickering glow of a street lamp far below. But in your mind, you're somewhere else. Somewhere alive with color, music, and life. Somewhere where the mundane routine of Soviet days fades away into a distant memory. And at the center of this dream, glowing like a beacon, is a simple pair of blue jeans, foreign, perfect, and so very forbidden. You have heard stories, whispers passed carefully between neighbors or caught on shortwave radio broadcasts. Stories of Levi's, Wranglers, and Lee jeans, names that sound exotic and impossible here, like artifacts from a different universe. These jeans aren't just clothes, they're a symbol. A symbol of freedom, individuality, and a life beyond the dull sameness of Soviet existence. On Soviet streets, everyone wears similar drab clothing, gray, brown, beige, The same polyester trousers, the same ill-fitting skirts, the same patched coats handed down through the years. Your own wardrobe is no exception. Your pants have been mended so many times the fabric has lost its original color, replaced instead with a patchwork of thread and memories. The idea of slipping on a pair of soft, sturdy blue jeans with neat seams and a well-stitched label feels like touching a fragment of another world. You recall the rare moments when tourists or diplomats have passed through your city. They walk casually, heads held high, dressed in vibrant, comfortable clothes, jeans that fit just right, jackets with logos, colorful scarves fluttering in the wind. Their confidence is magnetic, their style unattainable. You watch from a distance, longing to trade your dull uniform for those coveted garments, imagining the way the denim hugs their legs as they stride past. The black market is a whispered hope, a secret realm where a lucky few barter for these jeans at exorbitant prices. But for most, including you, it remains an unreachable dream. Queues at state stores stretch for hours, only to be met with empty shelves or overpriced, poor-quality knockoffs. The official stores rarely stock anything Western, and if they do, the items disappear within moments. The official media derides these foreign products as decadent and unnecessary, but to you, they are a glimpse of possibility. You imagine the feel of denim against your skin, rough yet soft, durable yet flexible. You picture the faint scent of freshly washed jeans, the cool sensation as they slide over your legs. Wearing them, you think, would change how you move, how you feel, how you face the world. They are more than fabric. They are an armor against conformity, a badge of quiet rebellion. Late at night, when the rest of the building sleeps, you hear faint melodies drifting from a neighbor's radio, the soft crackle of forbidden rock music, the voices of distant singers. This music belongs to the world where blue jeans exist, a soundtrack to freedom and dreams. You close your eyes and let the rhythms carry you away from the cramped apartment, the cold concrete, and the constant surveillance. Yet morning always returns. You dress in the same patched trousers and plain shirt, preparing for another day of routine. The dream of blue jeans remains locked in your heart, a small spark of hope that maybe, someday, the gray walls will fall away and the colors of the world will flood in. Until then, you hold on to that dream, fragile but unyielding, a symbol that even in the toughest times, the human spirit craves freedom and individuality. The weekend finally comes like a small miracle, a brief chance to break free from the suffocating confines of the Khrushchyovka and the endless gray sprawl of the Soviet city. You pack your modest belongings carefully, a thermos filled with strong, bitter black tea brewed hours earlier, a few homemade sandwiches wrapped in crumpled wax paper, and a bottle of kvass, its slightly sour fizz a reminder of simpler times. Today, you are going to your friend's dacha, that small wooden refuge nestled among rows of similar houses in the communal garden plots just outside the city limits. The journey itself is a ritual. You board a crowded bus or a rattling electric train, squeeze shoulder to shoulder with dozens of other city dwellers eager to escape the concrete jungle for a breath of fresh air. Around you, faces are tired but hopeful. Some carry baskets and tools, others clutch thermoses or bundles of food for the day. You catch snippets of hushed conversations about the weather, the latest shortages, or plans for planting this year's crops. The air inside the carriage is thick with the mixed scents of wool coats, cigarette smoke, and the faint aroma of freshly baked black bread. As the bus rattles past the last high-rise buildings, the city's harsh lines soften, and a patchwork of birch trees and open fields unfurls outside the window. The sky is a pale, cold blue, edged with the faint pink blush of dawn or dusk depending on the season. This journey marks your passage from the uniform, gray concrete of urban life to the scattered bursts of color and nature that characterize the dacha communities, a stark reminder of the world beyond the city's relentless sameness. You step off the bus at a small stop marked by a weathered wooden sign, and the scent of pine and damp earth immediately fills your lungs, a welcome contrast to the stale city air. The dacha settlement spreads before you, neat rows of small, wooden houses painted in faded greens, blues, and yellows, each surrounded by tiny fenced gardens bursting with the first shoots of potatoes, cabbage, or tomatoes, depending on the season. Despite their modest size and simple construction, these dachas are vibrant patches of life, pockets of independence where city folk carve out a small piece of the natural world. Your friend greets you at the gate with a warm, genuine smile, wearing sturdy denim overalls and a well-worn hat that's seen many seasons. The friendship feels renewed with the easy comfort of shared escapes from the city's dull routine. Inside the dacha, the air is thick with the mixed aromas of freshly baked rye bread cooling on the windowsill and the herbal sharpness of dill and parsley drying on a string in the corner. A samovar steams quietly on a small wood stove, promising the comfort of hot tea to come. The furniture is simple but well cared for, a wooden table scarred by years of use, chairs with threadbare cushions, and shelves lined with jars of preserved vegetables and homemade pickles, a testament to the self-reliance that life at the dacha demands. You sit down, savoring the warmth that spreads through your hands from the thick ceramic cup of tea, the bitterness grounding you in the moment. Outside, the world is alive with subtle sounds, the distant chirping of birds, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, and the low murmur of neighbors tending their gardens or chatting over fences. For a while, the heavy weight of Soviet bureaucracy, shortages, and monotony lifts. Here, time seems slower, softer, as if the very earth breathes differently. After tea and a simple meal, you both head outside, grabbing shovels and gloves to tend the garden plots. The soil is cold and crumbly, rich with promise beneath the surface. You dig small trenches, plant seedlings with care, and pull stubborn weeds, your hands growing rough and dirty, a tactile connection to something primal and grounding that the city can never provide. Conversation flows easily between tasks, stories weaving through memories of childhood, work, and the small pleasures that sustain you. The hours pass quietly, marked only by the shifting light. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky with shades of orange, pink, and violet, you find a place on the wooden porch to sit and rest. The air cools rapidly, carrying the comforting scent of wood smoke from neighbors' stoves and the faint metallic tang of approaching night. You watch the silhouettes of trees dance against the twilight, feeling a peacefulness rare and precious in the Soviet world. When the time comes to leave, the journey back to the city feels different. The apartment awaits, with its cracked walls and endless queues, but inside you carry the memory of this day, a small ember of hope and freedom. The dacha is more than a place. It is a reminder that beyond the harshness of daily life, there is still space for growth, for joy, for moments of escape. The bitter cold outside bites through your thick coat as you step into the familiar hum of the Khrushchyovka. The city is cloaked in a heavy blanket of snow, streets lined with frost-coated trees, and the occasional crackle of ice underfoot echoes in the stillness of the early evening. It's late December, and the atmosphere feels charged with anticipation. Despite all the hardships, the Soviet New Year celebration holds a special place in everyone's hearts, a rare moment of joy and warmth during the long, dark winter. Your apartment, small and worn but lovingly maintained, has been transformed for the occasion. The usual gray walls are brightened by strings of multicolored electric bulbs, red, green, blue, and yellow, that cast flickering reflections on the cracked windows and faded wallpaper. In the corner stands the New Year tree, a modest fir brought from a distant market, its branches heavy with handmade decorations, fragile glass baubles glistening like captured light, shimmering tinsel, and small paper stars cut by your own hands and carefully taped to the branches. The scent of pine mingles with the warm, comforting aroma of simmering borscht, rich with beets and a dollop of sour cream, alongside plates of pierogi stuffed with cabbage and ground meat, their golden crusts freshly baked. A bowl of Olivier salad, a mixture of boiled potatoes, peas, carrots, pickles, and mayonnaise, sits at the center of the table, a festive staple even when ingredients are scarce. Nearby, a bottle of Sovetskoye Champagnesko, Soviet sparkling wine, rests in a basin of cold water, waiting for the midnight toast. The apartment fills quickly with family and close friends, their faces flushed from the cold but bright with excitement. Grandparents, parents, children, all gather around the table, sharing stories and laughter, their voices weaving together in a warm chorus that contrasts sharply with the harshness of the outside world. Outside, the city's usual gray is softened by the soft glow of street lamps reflecting off the snow, and from distant windows comes the muffled sound of radios playing traditional New Year songs. As the evening wears on, conversations drift to memories of New Year celebrations past, tales of less prosperous years and small triumphs, moments of kindness found in unexpected places, and the simple joys of togetherness. The radio announces the approach of midnight, and the Kremlin clock's chimes ring out, resonant and clear through the thin walls, counting down the final seconds of the old year. At midnight, glasses clink in unison as everyone raises their sparkling wine in a toast. The president's New Year speech plays on the television. Speaking of peace, unity, and the bright future promised by socialism. Outside, fireworks burst in vivid colors, briefly illuminating the snowy streets, and the hopeful faces turned skyward. Children squeal with delight, rushing to open carefully wrapped gifts, often small but meaningful, a new scarf, a book, a toy made with love. After the formalities, some of the group bundle up and step outside into the crisp air. Neighbors gather on the sidewalks and near frozen ponds to skate, sing, and exchange warm wishes, their breath rising in clouds of steam. The city, usually so stern and regimented, feels alive with shared celebration, a community holding tightly to a fragile thread of joy. For these few hours, the Soviet New Year replaces Christmas, filling the void left by years of official suppression with its own unique traditions, a time to hope, to dream, and to cherish what matters most: family, friendship, and the quiet belief in a better tomorrow. When you finally return to your quiet Khrushchyovka apartment, the lights dimmed and the city silent once again, you carry with you the glow of that evening, a small, flickering flame of warmth that will help see you through the long winter ahead. The evening light fades quickly outside your window, swallowed by the heavy gray sky of a long Soviet winter. Inside your cramped Khrushchyovka apartment, the only illumination comes from a flickering candle perched on the small wooden table, a fragile flame fighting the encroaching darkness. The cold from outside tries to seep through the thin walls, but tonight, the chill is nothing compared to the nervous excitement coursing through your veins. Carefully, you pull from a hidden nook beneath a loose floorboard a small book, its cover plain and unremarkable, worn from secretive handling. This is no ordinary book, it's a smuggled copy of a banned author, one whose words were deemed dangerous by the party. Just possessing it is an act of quiet rebellion, one that could lead to whispered interrogations, a visit from the KGB or worse. Yet, the hunger to know, to understand, outweighs the fear that knots your stomach. You settle into your worn armchair, the fabric thin and threadbare from years of use. The musty scent of old paper mingles with the faint aroma of the tea you brewed earlier. As you open the fragile pages, the soft crackle of turning paper fills the room like a secret melody. The words inside are forbidden truths, stories that the government censors erase from history books and newspapers. Here, voices long silenced find a chance to speak again, whispers of dissent, poems of heartbreak and hope, essays questioning the foundations of the regime. Outside, the world continues its routine. Neighbors in their gray coats hurry home from the factory, the distant sound of a radio broadcasting the evening news full of triumphant achievements, and warnings against enemies of the people. But inside your little apartment, these official narratives fade away, replaced by the powerful, raw honesty of the text. With every sentence, you feel yourself stepping into a hidden world, one where thoughts are freer, where people dare to dream beyond the rigid confines of Soviet life. The risk is palpable. You know the consequences if the book were discovered. Yet you read on, heart pounding, eyes scanning pages that reveal a reality far richer and more complex than the bland propaganda that fills public spaces. You imagine the countless others who clutch similar books in secret, who meet quietly in dimly lit rooms to exchange smuggled manuscripts and stories. A silent network of resistance bound by the yearning for truth and freedom. For a few precious hours, you join that secret society, connected by courage and curiosity. As the candle sputters, casting flickering shadows that dance like ghosts across the cracked walls, you close the book reluctantly. The weight of the outside world presses back in, but inside you, something has shifted, a spark of hope, a quiet defiance that refuses to be extinguished. You hide the book once more, careful to erase any sign it was ever there, but the knowledge remains, a secret light in the dark. A reminder that even in the harshest times, the human spirit finds ways to resist, to dream, and to endure. Tonight, in your small, gray Khrushchyovka apartment, the impossible feels just a little bit closer. The cold light of dawn barely penetrates the dusty curtains of your cramped Khrushchyovka apartment. Outside, the harsh, indifferent gray of the Soviet cityscape stretches endlessly, but inside, a different kind of storm brews, the persistent, nagging problem of your broken washing machine. You stand in the cramped kitchen, staring down at the bulky metal box that was supposed to make life easier but has, instead, become a daily source of frustration and anxiety. The washing machine sputtered and clanked last night, then fell silent, refusing to start again no matter how many times you flicked the switch or pressed the buttons. A mechanical failure, yes, but more than that, a small disaster in the rhythm of your life. In the Soviet Union, owning a washing machine was a privilege, a luxury many could only dream of. But with that luxury came a heavy price, frequent breakdowns, unreliable parts, and repairs that often required months of waiting and connections to the right people. Spare parts were scarce commodities, and technicians were few and far between. The state factories churn out these machines quickly and cheaply, focusing on quantity over quality, leaving the owners to deal with the consequences. You sigh deeply and roll up your sleeves. The faded manual you found tucked away years ago offers little help. Its thin pages are yellowed and brittle, the instructions vague and incomplete. But this is all you have. You drag a small toolbox from the corner, its contents a chaotic mix of tools gathered over the years, many borrowed, some homemade. Kneeling beside the washing machine, you remove the access panel with a practiced hand. Inside, a tangled maze of wires, belts, and rusty metal parts greets you like a mechanical jungle. You listen carefully for the source of the problem: a loose belt slipping, a motor that hums weakly but won't turn, a clogged water pump that stubbornly refuses to drain. Without replacement parts, your repairs are acts of desperate improvisation. You tighten screws with a screwdriver that's seen better days. You bend and twist wires to bypass faulty connections. You jury-rig makeshift patches with pieces of wire and old rubber bands. It's a patchwork solution born of necessity, not skill, but somehow it breathes life back into the machine. Hours pass in a blur of cold sweat and aching joints. The radio plays softly in the background, a government broadcast reciting the latest achievements of the 5-year plan, but none of that progress touches your battered washing machine. It is a symbol of the disconnect between the promises of the state and the gritty reality of everyday life. You finally manage to get the machine to whirl again, its familiar clunking rhythm a small victory amid the vast monotony of Soviet existence. Clothes tumble inside, soaked in detergent that was rationed carefully, washed in water heated on the communal boiler down the hall. Even as you watch the machine work, you know this fix is temporary. It may break down again tomorrow or the day after, and you'll be back at this same spot, wrench in hand, battling the same stubborn machine. But for now, in this tiny, cramped kitchen, you have carved out a moment of control, a small rebellion against the relentless grind of Soviet life. As you sit back, exhausted but triumphant, the weight of the day presses down again. The washing machine, like so many things in this system, is fragile and unreliable, but your determination is not. This broken appliance is more than metal and wires. It is a testament to your resilience, to the countless small battles fought quietly in thousands of kitchens across the vast Soviet landscape. Outside, the world continues to move with the harsh rhythm of factories and factories. But inside your apartment, in this small, stubborn victory, you find a reason to keep going. You wake up early in the dim light filtering through the thin curtains of your Khrushchyovka apartment. The cold of the morning still lingers in the air, a reminder that winter's grip hasn't yet loosened its hold. You reach for your school uniform, the thick woolen jacket and trousers or skirt that hang stiffly in the cramped wardrobe. The fabric is coarse, rough against your skin, and the seams press uncomfortably, but this uniform is your armor, the badge of a Soviet student, worn with quiet pride and resigned acceptance. Pulling on the navy blue jacket, you button it up slowly, feeling the scratchy texture against your arms and neck. Your woolen socks are thick and itchy, tucked into shoes that have been polished but still show scuffs from the muddy streets. You wrap a scarf around your neck, pulling your hat low over your ears, and step into the small hallway, where the chill seems to seep from the walls themselves. Outside, the courtyard is blanketed in frost. The gray Soviet cityscape looms, tall concrete blocks, their windows fogged with cold, and the endless maze of streets slick with ice and snow. You join a stream of children making their way toward the school, bundled in similar uniforms, their breath puffing clouds into the freezing air. Some chatter quietly, others trudge silently, their faces red from the cold. The familiar crunch of footsteps on frozen gravel fills the morning. At school, the heavy wooden doors creak as you enter the chilly hallways, where coats hang on hooks and boots line the floors, damp and dirty from the outside world. The smell of damp wool mixes with chalk dust and a faint trace of cleaning chemicals. The classroom is a modest space, with wooden desks arranged in neat rows, and a large blackboard at the front where the teacher writes with white chalk. Your desk is scratched and worn, bearing the marks of countless students who have come before you. The textbooks are shared and faded, well-used volumes with yellowed pages, dog-eared corners, and underlined passages from generations of pupils. You open your copy of Soviet history, reading about the heroes of the revolution and the triumphs of the worker state. The words feel heavy with meaning, but your mind drifts sometimes to the frozen playground outside or the warmth of your home kitchen. The woolen uniform itches relentlessly, a constant irritation you try to ignore. Your fingers rub at your neck where the collar scrapes, and you adjust your sleeves to keep the chill at bay. The lessons are long and strict. The teacher's voice is firm, sometimes sharp, as she guides you through arithmetic problems, grammar exercises, and patriotic poems. Everyone is expected to listen attentively and recite answers when called upon. There's no room for daydreams or distractions. During recess, the schoolyard feels like another frozen wasteland. The metal swings are stiff with ice, the slide coated in frost that gleams under the pale sun. You huddle with friends, your breath steaming in the cold air as you share whispered conversations about your favorite stories or the latest gossip. Some trade small treats, a piece of black bread, a scrap of homemade jam, treasures brought from home in a world where sweets and luxuries are rare. Physical education classes are especially challenging in winter. You wear your thick uniform and boots, running across the snow-covered field while the cold bites at your cheeks and fingers. The teacher blows a whistle and calls out commands in a voice that cuts through the wind, pushing everyone to keep moving despite the icy conditions. Back in class, the day's lessons continue with geography, science, and reading. The textbooks emphasize the strength and progress of the Soviet Union, the importance of collective work, and the bright future awaiting every loyal citizen. Yet beyond the classroom walls, you sometimes wonder what that future will truly look like. Finally, the last bell rings. You gather your things and step back into the cold, the woolen uniform feeling heavier now, soaked with the day's wear and the cold's lingering chill. The walk home stretches ahead, past the same gray buildings and frozen courtyards, the scent of wood smoke rising from chimneys blending with the sharp winter air. Despite the discomfort, despite the monotony, there's a quiet pride in wearing your uniform, a symbol of belonging to something larger than yourself. A part of the vast machinery of Soviet life. You pull your scarf tighter, brace against the wind, and trudge forward, ready to face another day in the life of a Soviet schoolchild. It's late afternoon as you finish packing your small overnight bag, the fabric slightly worn and patched from many journeys before. Your hands tremble a little with anticipation and a hint of nervousness. You're about to board a night train that will carry you hundreds of kilometers across the vast expanse of the Soviet Union. Tonight, you will leave your familiar Khrushchyovka, the cramped gray apartment, the cold streets of your micro-district, and travel to visit relatives in a distant republic, maybe to warm and sunlit Georgia, or the endless golden plains of Ukraine, or even the rugged mountains of Armenia. The streets outside are already cooling as winter's early dusk creeps in. You wrap your thick scarf tighter, pull your woolen coat close, and step out into the steady stream of people heading to the train station, workers coming home, families traveling, soldiers on leave. The station itself is a massive, gray concrete building, buzzing with life and echoes of countless departures and arrivals. Inside, the scent of strong tea from kiosks mixes with the sharp aroma of coal and machinery. You clutch your ticket tightly, a thin, fragile piece of paper stamped with official seals and printed in neat Cyrillic letters, the only permission you need to cross so many borders inside one vast country. Passing through the turnstile, you join the flow of passengers, your boots clicking on the worn tile floor. The platform is packed with people, their faces tired but hopeful. Children run and play, mothers soothe crying babies, old men lean on canes, talking quietly about the weather and the latest news from the party. You hear many languages here, Russian, Ukrainian, Georgian, and others, a subtle reminder of the diverse mosaic that makes up the Soviet Union. Boarding the train, you step into a narrow corridor lined with small compartments. Inside your berth, the worn leather seats fold down into beds covered with faded gray blankets, their coarse texture somewhat comforting in its familiarity. You settle in beside a small window fogged by the breath of passengers. The compartment is dimly lit by a single yellow bulb, casting long shadows on the scratched wooden walls. As the train lurches forward, the rhythmic clatter of wheels over rails becomes a steady lullaby. Outside, the landscape slips past like a silent movie in black and white, snow-covered fields, bare trees silhouetted against the moonlight, tiny villages with chimneys smoking in the cold air. Every so often, the glow of a distant town flickers briefly, then vanishes behind the darkness. The close quarters bring strangers together. You share the compartment with a grandmother knitting quietly, a young man reading a tattered book, and a mother calming her restless child. Their voices are low and warm, stories told in hushed tones about the harvest, the upcoming May Day celebrations, and memories of the war. The smells of strong black tea in a thermos, homemade black bread wrapped in cloth, and pickled cucumbers fill the air, a tiny feast against the backdrop of metal and cold. Sleep is fitful. The hard berth and the constant swaying of the train make it difficult to find comfort. You pull your blanket tight around your shoulders and listen to the muffled sounds of the other passengers breathing, the occasional footsteps in the corridor, the whistle of the engine piercing the night. At every stop, the doors hiss open, and a rush of cold air sweeps in, carrying the scent of pine forests or salty sea breeze depending on the region. Vendors sometimes come aboard, their voices loud but fleeting, selling hot pies or newspapers, but most passengers remain quietly waiting for the journey to continue. You think about your relatives waiting at the final station, their warm kitchen, the smell of fresh bread baking, the sound of familiar voices in a language slightly different from your own. You imagine the long evenings around a wooden table, cups of sweet tea, laughter, and stories. This visit is more than just a trip. It's a connection to roots, a bridge across the many worlds inside this sprawling country. The train carries you through the night, past frozen rivers glistening under the stars, past forests that seem endless and silent, into a different time zone, a different part of your life. Finally, just as dawn begins to tinge the sky with pale pink, the train slows and pulls into a quiet station. You gather your things, feeling the stiff ache in your limbs, but also a swelling warmth inside. Stepping onto the platform, the cold air greets you sharply, but your heart feels light. You have arrived. Your relatives are there, waiting with smiles and open arms, ready to welcome you into their world, their stories, their warmth. The journey has been long, uncomfortable, and tiring, but it's also a thread woven into the rich fabric of Soviet life. The countless journeys connecting families, republics, and histories across a vast, complex nation. Imagine waking up one morning in a cramped Khrushchyovka apartment, the gray light of dawn slipping through the curtains, and feeling a familiar mix of hope and frustration. Today, like every year, you will visit the local auto cooperative office, your only chance to inch closer to a dream decades in the making, owning a Soviet car. It's a dream tangled up in the cold, gray bureaucracy of the USSR, where the concept of personal ownership is wrapped in layers of scarcity, control, and unrelenting patience. From the moment you first set foot in the drab government building where applications are accepted, the air smells of stale cigarettes and cheap tea, the walls plastered with faded propaganda posters promising a bright socialist future. Behind the counter, a tired clerk shuffles papers with a sigh that seems to carry the weight of 1,000 waiting names. You hand over your filled-out application, name, job, family status, and the simple wish for a car. No choice of make or model, no special requests. The state decides everything. You receive your number on the queue, a slip of thin paper, yellowed and creased, but treasured like a talisman. This number is your lifeline, your ticket to a better life, yet also a cruel reminder of how slow the system moves. Because in the Soviet Union, the car is not just a vehicle, it's a status symbol, a scarce resource rationed by the state, and your position on this list can take years, often more than a decade, to move up. Years pass. Each time you visit, you see the same worn faces, fellow dreamers caught in the same limbo, whispering rumors of privileged buyers, party officials, factory managers, or friends with connections who leapfrog the line. You realize that your place in the queue is less about fairness and more about who you know, how much patience you have, and sometimes sheer luck. You watch the city around you change. The dull concrete blocks give way to newer constructions. The buzz of trams and trolleybuses fills the air. But your life remains tethered to the whims of a system that seems indifferent to your desires. Public transportation is your daily reality. Crowded buses, cold winters waiting at stops, and the constant jostling of faceless crowds. Sometimes, a friend or relative offers a ride, but mostly, you rely on your own 2 feet. Financially, saving for a car is an uphill battle. The average Soviet salary barely stretches to cover basic needs, so putting aside money for a car means sacrificing small pleasures, extra food, warm clothes, or outings. Inflation sometimes makes the costs rise unpredictably, and black market dealers whisper about imported cars at sky-high prices. But these are beyond your reach and come with risks. When your turn finally arrives, the moment feels surreal. You receive a call to come to the dealership and claim your car. But the excitement is tempered by reality. The vehicle you get is often a basic model, perhaps a Lada 2101 with its simple, boxy design, lacking any luxury features. Sometimes the paint is chipped, the seats worn, the engine noisy. Yet, despite imperfections, the car is yours, a tangible proof of years spent waiting, hoping, and enduring. Driving that car for the first time is an emotional milestone. The engine's roar is not just mechanical noise. It's a triumph over an impersonal system, a taste of freedom in a tightly controlled society. Suddenly, you can leave the crowded city trams behind, plan trips to the countryside, or visit relatives in distant towns. The car symbolizes more than transport. It's your personal space, a bubble of independence amid the collective. But owning a Soviet car comes with its own challenges. Spare parts are scarce, repairs expensive and complicated. Service stations are often overwhelmed, and sometimes you spend hours in line just to get basic maintenance. Fuel shortages mean queuing at gas stations for hours, sharing conversations with strangers, exchanging news and gossip while waiting. Every journey requires planning. Every breakdown tests your resilience. Still, that car makes your life different. It opens possibilities previously closed. You can work farther from home, carry groceries without struggling on public transport, and feel a pride that few others can claim. You understand that behind every Soviet car lies a story of perseverance, of enduring an unforgiving system to claim a small piece of personal freedom. This is the paradox of Soviet life, a society built on collective ideals, yet within it, individuals hunger for moments of autonomy. The car you finally own after 12 long years isn't just metal and wheels. It's a symbol of hope, frustration, endurance, and a deeply human desire to move forward, to break free, even if just a little. The evening descends with a heavy silence that presses down on the city like a lead blanket. The sky is an endless stretch of dull gray, heavy with the weight of unseen surveillance, and the biting cold seeps into every crack of the concrete around your Khrushchyovka building. You clutch your coat tighter as you climb the familiar, worn stairs, each step echoing hollowly in the stairwell. The smell of damp plaster and old cigarette smoke lingers in the stale air, mixing with the faint, distant sounds of muffled radio chatter from neighbors' apartments. Reaching your door, you fumble with your keys, your fingers numb from the cold and trembling from a growing dread. Suddenly, two figures emerge from the shadowy corridor, silhouettes etched sharply against the flickering light of the overhead bulb. Their long, dark coats and sharp hats are unmistakable, agents of the KGB, the ever-watchful eyes of the Soviet state. Your breath catches in your throat as you freeze. They don't waste time with greetings or formalities. The weight of their presence fills the small hallway like an invisible storm. You can feel their eyes boring into you, searching, judging, dissecting every nuance of your expression, every hesitation, every twitch of your hands. The air seems to thicken, making it hard to breathe. You realize this is no casual visit. It is an interrogation without questions yet spoken. The taller one steps forward, his voice low and controlled, carrying the heavy authority of the state. "Comrade, we have some matters to discuss." His words are simple, but beneath them lies a universe of unspoken threats. The other agent stands slightly behind, silent but alert, like a hawk waiting to swoop. You swallow the lump rising in your throat and steady your hands, forcing your face into a mask of calm. Your mind races through all the conversations you've had recently. The jokes about bread shortages, the whispered complaints about the party, the subtle, harmless dissent you never thought worth remembering. Were those words enough to make you a target? Or is this simply a random check, a way to remind you that freedom is a dangerous illusion here? Questions begin to come, clipped, clinical, probing. Who do you know outside this building? Have you attended gatherings not sanctioned by the party? Are you in possession of prohibited books or materials? The agent's words hang in the air like a thick fog, suffocating, accusing. You do not answer. Not because you are guilty, but because silence is your shield. Every syllable spoken might be twisted into a confession, turned against you or someone else. You learned early on that the less you say, the longer you live. The agents lean in slightly, their expressions hardening as the silence stretches. You feel the pressure of their gaze intensify, like a physical force pressing into your skin, searching for cracks. Your heart pounds loudly, filling your ears with its relentless rhythm, drowning out all else. Inside, your thoughts spiral. Memories of neighbors who vanished overnight, rumors whispered in hushed tones about the endless prisons and camps. You recall the faces of friends who suddenly stopped answering your greetings, their apartments empty, their names erased. Fear coils around your gut like a living thing, but you do not betray it. Minutes feel like hours. Your breath forms small clouds in the freezing air as you stand frozen, your mind a battleground of fear and resolve. The longer you remain silent, the more the agents grow frustrated, their questions sharper, more insistent, but you say nothing. Finally, without a word of warning, they turn and leave, their footsteps fading into the dark stairwell, leaving you alone with the echo of your pounding heart and the lingering chill of dread. The door closes behind them with a final, heavy thud, a sound that marks both an ending and a beginning. You lean against the door, your body trembling not from cold but from the rush of adrenaline and relief. In this moment, you understand the cruel reality of life under surveillance, the power of silence, the weight of fear, and the endless necessity of caution. You will speak less, watch more, and trust no one, because in this world, to say nothing is to survive. The cold gray light of a late autumn afternoon seeps through the thin curtains of your cramped Khrushchyovka apartment, where the faded wallpaper peels softly at the corners and the chipped paint on the wooden window frame whispers stories of decades past. The room smells faintly of boiled cabbage and stale cigarette smoke, mingling with the lingering scent of dust disturbed only hours ago during your weekly cleaning. You sit in the worn armchair that has slowly molded to your shape over years of restless nights and quiet days, your hands folded tightly in your lap, eyes fixed on the small, boxy radio perched precariously on the scratched wooden table. The radio crackles to life, the static filling the room like a low hum of distant machinery, an ever-present soundtrack of Soviet life, usually ignored, just background noise to the everyday struggles and routines. But today, as the familiar formal music fades away, a voice breaks through the static, not the usual cold, rehearsed tone of government announcements, but something markedly different. It is Mikhail Gorbachev, the youngest leader the Soviet Union has seen in decades, speaking not just to inform, but to connect. His voice is earnest yet cautious, tinged with a softness that contrasts starkly with the rigid propaganda you're used to. He does not deliver slogans or empty promises, but speaks openly, almost vulnerably, about the need for change, glasnost, openness, perestroika, restructuring, words that have begun to circulate quietly among whispered conversations but never openly discussed in your household. Comrades, our nation stands at a crossroads. The world around us is changing, and we must change with it. It is time to look honestly at our past, at the mistakes, at the silences that have kept us from moving forward. The weight of his words presses down on you like the gray sky outside, thick and heavy. For a moment, the small apartment feels less like a cage and more like a fragile sanctuary where hope dares to flicker. You glance at the portraits of Lenin and Marx, which have hung unchanged on the wall since your parents moved in. The same images you've seen countless times now seem distant, almost hollow, as if the very foundations of the world you knew are trembling. Outside, the city hums its usual cold rhythm, the clang of trolleybuses, the distant shouting of children playing in the frost-bitten courtyard, the muted roar of factory machinery. But inside this small, worn room, the future feels suddenly uncertain and alive. You think about the neighbors who talk nervously about the reforms, about the whispered fears of what openness might mean, more freedom. But also more risk, more exposure, more questions without clear answers. You reach slowly for your notebook, its pages dog-eared and smudged from years of careful scribbling, and begin jotting down the phrases that seem to promise a fragile new dawn. Glasnost. Perestroika. Words heavy with possibility and danger in equal measure. You wonder how long before the voices of dissent are truly heard, and how long before they are silenced again. The broadcast ends, leaving behind a thick silence broken only by the crackle of static. Your heart races, a strange mixture of fear, hope, and cautious curiosity swirling within your chest like the cold wind outside. You feel the invisible eyes of the state watching, always watching, waiting to see how you will respond to this new voice, the voice of change. Tonight, as you sit in the fading light, you realize that nothing will ever be quite the same. The Iron Curtain has a new crack, and whether it will widen into a doorway or a chasm depends on what comes next, and on what you dare to believe. The pale light of the evening seeps softly through the thin, threadbare curtains of your small apartment in the Khrushchyovka. The familiar hum of the city, the rattling of trolleybuses, the distant clatter of footsteps on the concrete sidewalks, the muffled voices of neighbors returning home, seems quieter tonight, as if the whole world is holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold beyond the horizon. Outside, the frost is already settling in patches on the window panes, and the trees stand bare against the dimming sky. It is late autumn, the year 1989, a moment suspended on the cusp of history. You sit on the edge of your creaking bed, wrapped in the thin but familiar blanket, your fingers tracing the worn fabric of the sheets, faded from years of use. Around you, the room is cluttered with the remnants of everyday Soviet life, a chipped porcelain cup with traces of black tea, a stack of dog-eared books hastily pushed aside, a small radio whose crackling voice has accompanied you through decades of uncertainty. On the walls hang the portraits of leaders long gone, symbols of an era that seems both distant and immediate in its weight. Tonight, as you prepare to close your eyes, the voices on the radio speak not of victory or slogans, but of change, tentative, cautious, but unmistakable. Mikhail Gorbachev's reforms, once whispered rumors, have begun to ripple through the very fabric of society. Glasnost has opened windows previously sealed shut. Perestroika has begun to loosen the rigid gears of the Soviet machine. Yet, the future remains unclear, a fragile thread stretched between hope and fear. You think back on the years that brought you here, the long queues outside stores for bread and soap, the crowded communal kitchens where lives intertwined in shared struggle, the gray micro-districts that spread like vast concrete jungles under endless skies. You remember the bitter cold winters when heating was unreliable, the Sunday walks in the park where laughter mingled with the crunch of frost underfoot, and the quiet evenings spent listening to foreign music in secret, longing for something beyond the Iron Curtain. Despite the hardships, there were moments of warmth, a neighbor's smile, a child's laughter echoing down the stairwell, the secret thrill of foreign blue jeans glimpsed on a passing tourist. These memories rise and fall like waves, carrying you gently towards sleep. Outside, the world is changing in ways you cannot fully grasp yet. The Berlin Wall is beginning to tremble, distant republics murmur for freedom, and the monolithic Soviet Union you have known all your life begins to fracture quietly, like ice cracking underfoot. You wonder what tomorrow will bring, and whether you will be ready to face the unknown. As your eyelids grow heavy, you feel a deep, bittersweet gratitude for the resilience that has carried you through decades of monotony and struggle, for the shared humanity that persisted even in the most controlled and constrained moments. You understand that history is not just the loud events recorded in books, but these quiet, intimate moments, the folding of a blanket, the scent of boiled cabbage, the whispered hopes that flicker like candles in the dark. And now, as you drift into sleep, you carry with you the stories of a life lived in a world that was complex, contradictory, and deeply human. The Soviet Union may be fading into the pages of history, but its echoes live on, in the buildings, the voices, the memories, and in you. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the Soviet Union's past, for stepping into this world that was at once harsh, mundane, and unexpectedly full of life. I hope these stories have helped you see beyond the surface, to feel the pulse of everyday existence behind the Iron Curtain. If this series resonated with you, please share your thoughts or memories in the comments below. Your voice helps keep these histories alive. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to explore more quiet, lesser-known chapters of history with me. Until next time, take care of yourself, cherish the small moments, and sleep well. The world is always quietly changing, and so are we.